Hello once again, and welcome to NCCP Anywhere. And wherever you are on God's green earth, I do declare and affirm that the Lord is with you and is with me, even though we're just together here via the internet. And it's great to be with you again. I'm Dave Stawick, the NCCP visiting homilist, and I send you greetings from Capitol Hill. And we are uh, doing our online service today from our home and my study in our home on Capitol Hill. And we're continuing this week on our Lenten journey together of uh, doing the distance formula, as we recall from the Grow Guide and also prominently on our website as well. And we have been using the idea of graphically talking about giving up for Lent some of our distance from God. We note that a number of traditions have that idea of giving up something for Lent. Well, what we want to do this year is to try to give up our distance from God, because that's the most important thing that we can do. And again, just to review in the graph, and thanks to Catherine, we're going to start with an image here that is, again, kind of explanatory, but we are moving again along the vertical axis of love of God and along the horizontal axis of love of neighbor. We're trying to get farther out from the origin and move from the point in the lower left-hand corner of that triangle. That's where we were on Ash Wednesday, and we are hoping to be at the point in the upper right on Easter. So what we're doing is we're moving along the hypotenuse of that right triangle, if you remember your geometry, and trying to give up our distance from God. So I hope things are going well for you. Now, during Lent, Pastor John first, and then later Pastor Jerry, Pastor Melissa were preaching from their set at a blackboard where they had their graphics. And today, I don't have a blackboard, but I am going to use another visual, again, thanks to Catherine. I am going to use analogies from my favorite sport of baseball. And there is a real connection, I think, at least visually, to what we're talking about here on our chart of the distance formula here during Lent. So hang with me and expand your minds a little bit. First of all, we're going to look at a familiar site for, I'm sure, for many of you, and that is over in Baltimore County at Camden Yards, the home of the Orioles. And you will recognize, of course, the warehouse out in right field and the iconic skyline of Baltimore. And now a tighter shot is of the infield, where the action really is going to take place, especially with runners and the scoring. And, you know, here's where I get the idea of the similarity to what we're doing. And that's if you take this next image, which is a way of looking at the graph that we used in the Grow Guide in a little different translation. And so we'll be coming back to that and talking about baseball. So talking about baseball, I'll put on my baseball cap and remember my days of coaching baseball. Pastor John was and still is a basketball coach. Well, baseball is my sport. And I coached for about 7 years here in DC of youth baseball, from all the way from Little League up to senior Babe Ruth. So I coached kids from 7 years old to 18 years old. But the year that I remember most fondly, quite frankly, was one season that is a transitional season for kids in baseball. And it is the 13-year-old year when they make the move from the small field of Little League, where the bases are only 60 feet apart, up to the regular size field, which is used in Babe Ruth and Senior Babe Ruth, high school, college, and in professional baseball, where the bases are 90 feet apart. And instead of the pitcher being 45 feet away from home plate, they're 60 and a half feet from home plate. So in addition to everything else that's going on for 13-year-old boys, right? Need I say more of their emotional and physical development? Here in that same year, we put them on a bigger baseball field, and so to help them in that, we keep the 13-year-olds together, just playing kids their own age, not older kids, and that helps them in that transition. So, having been a baseball player for many years myself, I realized that this is a big change in their baseball lives. And I thought about how, for the shortstops, it's a longer throw to first base. For third baseman, the same thing. Outfielders have more ground to cover. But, the position that I really empathized with the most were the catchers. Even though I had not been a catcher, I was a middle infielder. But I really felt that the main weight of the defense for these 13-year-old kids was going to be on the catchers, because they have this farther distance to throw towards second base when there's a runner on and trying to steal. And we figured, and we had been told by coaches, that that's what's going to happen. Is you're going to have kids, they get at that level, they can lead off of first base, they're going to try stealing second base the whole time. So or frequently anyway. So it got to wondering, how far is it actually from home plate to second base? Like I said, I've been around baseball all my life. I knew all of the cardinal distances, as it were, 90 feet between bases, 60 feet, 6 inches. I even knew how far it was to the outfield walls in a lot of stadiums. Like when I was growing up in Illinois, my alma mater, when I was growing up in Illinois, I was a Cubs fan, and I knew it was 353 feet down the left field line at Wrigley Field and 355 feet down the right field line. But in all that, I never knew how far it was to second base. And again, out of this empathy for my catchers, I thought, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm not gonna step it off, but I'm gonna dig back to my algebra and geometry, because I know the infield provides a right angle, and I can figure out the hypotenuse and figure out that distance. So here's the next image. We will take our graph and we rotate it 45 degrees with home plate in the lower left, first base down the horizontal axis, and second base being up in the upper right-hand corner. And so I'll skip some steps, but because we've got that right triangle, and we can then plot a line from home plate to second base, which is the hypotenuse of that right triangle, we can figure it down by taking the square root of the sum of the squares of the two sides, A and B. And that square root on a baseball field, 90-foot bases, is that from home to second base, it is just over 127 feet. 127 feet. And that breaking down that line further, you'll note that I make a mark where the pitching rubber is. And so the distance from the pitching rubber to home plate is 60 feet, 6 inches. So that means that from the pitcher to second base is 66 and a half feet. The pitcher's 66 and a half feet from second base. So we have a conundrum here. For the 13-year-olds, the pressure's on the catcher. He has to throw the ball 42 feet farther down to second base than he did playing baseball last year. How do we help the catcher out? And the answer is we shift the focus to the pitcher. We put more responsibility on the pitcher, and we try to, in essence, get the focus of the offense not on running on the catcher, but on running on the pitcher. Now, there are several things that the pitcher can do to help keep runners close at second base. And if I can't stand up, as a right-handed pitcher can come set, then he can look to first base, look again, or maybe sometimes he could come set and then step off of the pitching rubber. You can't see my foot, but I step off the rubber, or I could step off the rubber and throw to first base. Sometimes I can come set for just a second and then deliver to the plate. Sometimes I can come set and stop for 2 or 3 beats and then throw to the plate. There are all kinds of things anyway that the pitchers can do to get the attention of the base runner and to take the pressure off the catcher. In all of this, what we're doing, in essence, is we're moving along that line, and we're getting our defensive focus closer to second base. So we're not 127 feet, but 67 feet. That's baseball. But what we at NCCP are doing here during Lent is looking for ways to get closer to God. And in the same way, we're moving along this axis from Ash Wednesday, or along this slope from Ash Wednesday to Easter, and in that same way that we are shifting the focus from home plate toward the pitcher. All right, well, I've used up my baseball analogy here. But we're looking for ways to get closer to God, to separate, to narrow, rather, our distance from God. And my focus for this week on a way that we can get closer to God is to focus on thankfulness. Thankfulness, as in gratitude. Being thankful is an unmistakable image from Scripture. Our gospel from today, from John chapter 3, one of the most well-known parts of the New Testament. John 3:16, God so loved the world that God sent his Son that we would not perish. He sent Jesus to live with us, to be one of us, to teach us, to die for us. God so loved the world. Now, who can't be moved and grateful for that? Well, let's consider 2 other readings about thankfulness. Now, one of them is embedded in today's gospel, and it's Jesus comparing himself to an Old Testament story of the serpent on a pole from the book of Numbers. And the background to that story was Moses had led the Israelite people out of Egypt, but they were not all the way to the promised land. And as they were in that interregnum area, they were the typical ancient Hebrew people. They were grumbling and moaning and groaning and complaining about their food and their water and everything else. And actually, and this is another one of these hard stories from the Old Testament, but actually what God did was to punish them for their unruliness and their ingratitude. God turned loose some poisonous snakes in their midst, and a few of them were bitten and died. And Moses talks to God and says, how can I save my people? And God told Moses, well, create a bronze serpent model mounted on a pole, and you can hold up. And when people are bitten by one of those serpents, they can look up at your serpent on a pole, and they will be healed. Now, Jesus uses that Old Testament story actually to foreshadow his own death, and in the way that when he is nailed to a cross, and when his believers look at him or consider him on the cross, they will be saved as well. But again, the trigger for the whole story of the serpent on the pole for Moses was the ingratitude of the ancient Hebrew people. And so it's another lesson that they needed to be thankful. It's important. Now, the one final lesson to tell you about and to remind you of is a story of Jesus encountering the 10 men with leprosy and healing them. It's in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17. And I'm sure you remember the story. He's walking along, it was actually in a border area near Nazareth, and these men who were isolated from the rest of the community because of their condition, their physical condition, called out to him and they asked him for mercy. They asked him to heal them. And he said, well, go show yourself to the priests and you'll be well. Well, so they go and start moving and walking toward the town and to the priests, and they look and they look at their skin and in each other and they see they're healed. And of course they become ecstatic and they're running around in this excited and jubilant state. But only one of them comes back to Jesus. One of them, he lies down, he prostrates himself in front of Jesus, and he praises God and he praises Jesus. And Jesus' response tells you all you need to know about the importance of thankfulness. Jesus considered this man, and Jesus said, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Ooh, talk about a gut punch. Jesus is giving us a very clear signal that thankfulness is important. Now, he wasn't criticizing the one man who came back. And in fact, he said, get up, go on your way. Your faith has made you well. But never underestimate the importance of thankfulness at any time, but especially remember it here during Lent as a way, one of our Lenten disciplines, so that we can move closer to God. We've got to admit, though, I have to admit that gratitude, thankfulness can be rather hard these days. This awful pandemic has tested us in many ways. How can we be grateful now as we are past the 1-year point in this awful infection? Well, how we can be thankful is very personal, and it's for each of us to try to identify. But just to try to stimulate your thoughts, let me give you a few things that I'm thankful for at this point. First of all, the weather of this week. Spring is coming, and so is baseball, and so is farming, and Donald Cole's going to be sitting on a tractor sometime soon. That's all good news to look forward to. I'm thankful for the National Guard, for all of the troops who came here to Washington, D.C. to help keep us here on Capitol Hill safe on Inauguration Day, and a lot of them are still here. I'm thankful for all the folks on the front lines and who have been continuing to do their work during the pandemic. Folks like the healthcare professionals, God bless them. And also other people we maybe take for granted. At the pharmacy or at the grocery store, people who kept stocking those shelves and potentially coming in contact with people with the virus, but they kept working, and I am thankful for them. Many of us also have been able to work from home, and the fact that we've been able to figure out how to harness technology, just like this Zoom call that we're doing right now, is really amazing, and it's something to be thankful for. And of course, on the COVID front, we have things to be grateful for. The improvements in our vaccination numbers. I just saw that the state of Maryland will probably next week be approaching 12% of people fully vaccinated. Reductions in hospitalizations, and of course, the governor has eased some restrictions, and that means we hope that Camden Yards on opening day for the Orioles will have at least some fans in the stands. So those are all things to be thankful for, even on the COVID front. But I implore you, keep wearing your mask, keep your social distance, and check with your healthcare provider about whether you should get immunized. And I hope that you do have that opportunity soon. So let's get about gratitude. As individuals, through little things, thank yous to some of the people that I just mentioned. You know, when you go to the store, when you go to the pharmacy, thanking people. When you see a first responder, thanking them. A little thank you can go a long way and can mean an awful lot to them. And, you know, as the church, remember, the pinnacle of our services is on the first Sunday of the month and on special holidays when we have Holy Communion, the Lord's Supper, that sacrament. And remember that we call that rite the Great Thanksgiving. That's what we do in our church. The Lord be with you and also with you. Lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God. It is right to give God thanks and praise. Our great Thanksgiving in church. So let us be thankful this week. Let us come closer to God. Let's look at it this way. Let's get to the pitcher's mound today. And on Easter, I'll meet you at second base. Okay? Let's go. I'm in.